Good day everyone. We will generate cluster.log for troubleshooting always on availability group issues. Let's get started. If you have worked on any issues related to failover cluster or always on availability group, you know the critical importance of generating a cluster.log. For any issues related to failover cluster or always on availability group, we basically make use of SQL Server error logs, event viewer logs, and also use some DMVs related to always on availability group to check things. But as far as troubleshooting or root cause analysis for always on issues or failover cluster issues, cluster.log plays a very, very vital role. This is kind of a verbose logging related to cluster components. It notes down each and every event as far as cluster is concerned. And checking this cluster.log will be very much required for understanding any issues related to cluster or always on availability group. The level of details that we have on cluster.log is like too verbose. So looking at it and understanding it's going to be very, very tough for starters. But with the experience, you will be able to understand the details present in the cluster.log. But the very important thing is like this contains some very important and much required information for troubleshooting issues related to cluster. So for any issues related to cluster or always on availability group, we basically make use of cluster.log. So right now what we'll do is like we will try creating the cluster.log. So for that I'm going to utilize the command prompt. So the first command that I'm going to use is cluster/log/g. This is the command that I'm going to use. And if we press enter, what you are seeing is like we are getting an error stating like cluster is not recognized as an internal or external command, operable program or batch file. So right now this is the message that we are getting. So what we need to do is like we need to install this component. So what we'll do, we will go to the server manager, click on manage, and then click on add roles and features. Let's click on next, and then we will select role-based or feature-based installation, and then click on next. And here I'm going to select JBSWiki, that is where I'm logged in. So let's click on next. So let's click on next one more time, and then let's go to the features. So as far as the features are concerned here, what we'll do is like we will go to remote server administration tools. So if we see here, we have this remote server administration tools, and then we will expand this feature administration tools, and then let's see if we have something related to failover clustering. Yes, we have, and within this we are able to see that we have something called failover cluster command interface. So this is the role that is going to give us that cluster command. So let's click on next here, and then click on install here. So let's wait for this installation to complete. I will pause the video. Once the installation is completed, I will resume the video again. Okay, so the installation is completed now. The installation succeeded on this server. So let's click on close here, and then let's issue the same command one more time, which is cluster/log/g. Let's press enter. So what we are seeing is like we are getting an error, invalid option log. So the command would be cluster/log/g. Let's try this command. So if you see here, it is basically giving you an message that generating the cluster log. So what will happen is like it is basically going to connect to each of the servers that is part of this particular cluster, and then it is going to generate the cluster.log. So what I'll do is like let's log into the cluster administrator, and then let's look at the available nodes here. So if we see here, we just opened the cluster administrator. So now we will see our cluster. So JBSWiki cluster is the Windows cluster. And then if you look at the nodes here, you will be able to see that we have three nodes, JBSAG1, JBSAG2, and JBSAG3. So what will happen? The command that we executed, cluster-log/g, is going to connect to each of these nodes and then generate the cluster.log, and then it will basically put that information across to C drive, Windows, cluster slash reports. That is where it is going to put the reports. It would be C drive, Windows folder, and then inside the Windows folder you have cluster folder, and inside the cluster folder you have the reports folder, and inside the reports folder you will see the cluster.log. So now if you see here, the cluster log has been successfully generated on node JBS AG1, AG2, and AG3. So I'll open the, what we'll do is like we will open the location where the cluster log is present. So let's go to C colon Windows cluster and then reports. If we see here, you can see that the cluster.log is generated. So what is the time? 5 p.m. And if you look at the server time, it is close to 5:01 p.m. So right now, the cluster log is generated, but the only problem is like the cluster log for each of the nodes are generated on the respective server. So for example, if you connect to JBS AG2, you will see that the cluster log is generated there as well, but that would be local to that particular server. So if you go there, if you see here, the cluster log is generated around 5 p.m. So this clearly tells that the cluster log is generated, but it is present on the irrespective local server. So what we have to do is like we will basically have to copy these files and then bring it to a common location, and then we need to look at the data. And also to remember is like you need to rename the cluster log to whatever name that basically differentiates each cluster log for that particular server. And one more important thing that you need to understand is like the time that you will see on these log file that is on the cluster log is UTC, not the server time. So that is something that you need to be aware of. So what you have to do is like you need to generate these logs and then copy them to a common location, and then you can analyze the logs. But you need to keep in mind that the time that you have on the cluster log is basically UTC, and it is not the server time. You basically have to convert that to your local time, and then you need to check the logs further. And the next command that we are going to try is the same command that we are going to use, but the only thing is like we are going to generate a verbose log. Verbose log is going to have much more information. So let's execute this command. So the time is 5:03 p.m. So we will use the same command, cluster log /g, and then we will use switch /level and then number 5. So if we execute this, this is going to generate the cluster logs again on all the nodes. It basically connects to each of the nodes available. In my case, it is JBS AG1, JBS AG2, and JBS AG3, and then it will be creating a verbose cluster log on each of these nodes. So once this is completed, what we basically have to do is like again you need to copy these logs, put it into a common location, and then you basically have to look at the data. But one more thing that you need to keep in mind is that the time that is mentioned on these logs, that is the time event that you have for each and every entry, is based on UTC and not this local server time. So that is something that you need to be aware of. So this is completed. Let's go to the cluster logs. So if you see here, the cluster log is generated at 5:04 p.m. So one more thing to note is like as soon as you generate the cluster log, it is going to override the existing cluster log. So if you want that to be maintained, you basically have to rename it on each of these servers, and then you basically have to create a new one. Now let's consider you have a requirement where you want this cluster.log to be generated onto a common location, and also like you don't want the time in the cluster log to be your UTC time. Instead, it should be your a local server time. In that case, PowerShell comes to your rescue. So we have a command called Get-ClusterLog. So that's the command that we will be using. So we have this get cluster log. So now what I'm going to do is like I'm going to generate the log onto this location C drive cluster log. So what I'll do is like I will basically like go into this location, and then what I'll do is like I will use this command cluster log, and if you see here, we will use it as cluster log, and then what we will do is like we will basically tell that to use the local time. We will tell that to use the local time, and what we'll do is like we will also mention the destination location for copying this file to C colon cluster.log, and for that I will use the dot symbol here, which basically tells that you create the cluster.log onto this location C drive cluster log folder. So what this will do, this command will basically connect to each of these nodes, generates the cluster log, and then all these cluster log time that you have for each of these entries would be your local time, that is your server time. And one important thing is like it will basically copy all these files and put it into this particular location C cluster log. So let's execute this, and then let's see if that is what is going to happen, wherein it is going to create the entries with the time frame of the local server time, and also like brings in all these files onto the location that we have mentioned. We also, if you remember the previous command that we used where cluster log /g or cluster log with the higher verbose level, we basically like had it created cluster.log only. But if you see here, this is basically going to create the cluster log as the server name underscore cluster.log. So basically this PowerShell is going to solve a lot of work for us. Basically like there is high possibility we might miss some critical things as far as the timing is concerned. If it is not in local time, there can be some confusions, and also like when you create these on each of the local servers, you basically have to copy that and then bring it across to a common location. But this command takes care of everything. The only problem with this command is like there is no way you will be able to provide the verbose logging. So sometimes what happens is like the level of details while generating cluster.log can be very, very important during troubleshooting. Always on availability group can be a very, very good example. And this can be solved by changing the verbose logging property of the availability group. I will show you that in some time, but in the meantime, this command is completed. Let's go to this location cluster log, and then if you see here, the cluster log for each of the servers are created in this location, which is present in JBSWiki. So this way, we will be able to achieve everything. Well, the only thing is like there is no way we will be able to provide a verbosity verbose logging switch on the command. So for that, you basically have to do it from that particular resource. Let's consider it if we want to increase the verbosity for always on availability group, then what we will do is like for the always on resources, we can do it from the cluster administrator. Let's look at that. Let's open the failover cluster manager, and then let's go to the roles. In our case, we are more interested on always on availability group. So let's right click on the availability group resource, then click on properties, and click on the properties tab here. So you have an property here called verbose logging. This one, if you want, for example, like you want more level of details as far as always on availability group, as far as cluster.log is concerned, then you can basically change this value from 0 to 2. The only thing is like it is required that you will basically have to offline and online or wait till the next failover to happen to take this change effect. or else we can change this and then do a failover and failback, whatever is possible, you can do that. So what you can do is like you can change it to true and then click on apply OK, and then either failover, failback, or make this offline and online, and then you execute this command one more time. Get cluster, use local time destination. What will happen is like this time you will get a verbose cluster.log created onto this particular location. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Jai Hind.